Echo, do you know how to make a podcast? And he was like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And so came back the next day to the gym and he's like, all right, I know how to make a podcast. And I was like, cool. I was like, I'm going to do it. And he goes, can I be on it? And I was like, what are you going to do? And he said, I'll be normal and you be you. And I was like, well, that makes enough sense.
So how wild has this whole influencer journey been for you? Because I mean, you're like at the forefront of it. You were one of the first military influencers to blow up and become popular and well known and everything. And what's that ride been like?
I think it's hard for me to like relate to it because I just was doing what I was doing. It wasn't really a thing. And so I feel like maybe, you know, if we were out on patrol and I was like point man and I was like just breaking brush, looking at my map going, okay, we got to keep moving in this direction. And I wasn't paying too much attention, and I still don't really pay much attention to like what's going on, you know, with rear security and the views that they've got and other things that they see. So I've just been kind of doing what I've been doing, and I haven't really thought too much about the way, you know, like all that stuff too much. Yeah.
Because Joe Rogan was the first, that was like the
first podcast I did was with Tim Ferriss.
Oh, that's right.
So I did Tim Ferriss, and when Joe Rogan heard the Tim Ferriss podcast, he like reached out to me on Twitter and was like, "Hey, that was cool podcast, intense podcast. I'd love to have you on my show." And I was like, "Yeah, cool." And that was when Joe was still living out here. So I went to LA and I went on his podcast. And actually, the Tim Ferriss podcast, when we got done, Tim Ferriss said, like, he pressed stop on his recorder and he's like, you should start your own podcast. And I was kind of like, okay. And that, you know, Tim Ferriss is one of the biggest podcasts in the world at the time. And I was like, noted. And then when I went to Rogan, like in the middle of the podcast, was like, you should start your own podcast. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then he said it to me again at the end. And I guess I had talked to Echo at some point about it. Like, hey man, would you know how to do this? And then I got back from that and I was like, hey Echo, do you know how to make a podcast? And he was like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And so came back the next day to the gym and he's like, all right, I know how to make a podcast. And I was like, cool. I was like, I'm going to do it. And he goes, can I be on it? And I was like, what are you going to do? And he said, I'll be normal and you be you. And I was like, well, that makes enough sense. So
check.
Sure enough, that's what we did. So that's kind of where it started. And then, you know, there was no real, I just started reviewing old books and talking about really human nature through the lens of war and atrocity. And there was, oddly enough, a bunch of people that wanted to listen to that kind of thing. And
it's insane. You've transcended like all aspects of culture to the point where you are a meme. And which very is strange. It's a mark because like it's not like if you know, it's just like we all know. Like we all know Jocko. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to compliment you. I hope it's coming across that way.
Yeah, it's, you know, again, it's just sort of stuff that I've been interested in. And like, even like getting up early and working out, like that's what I did in the military. That's what I do here. There's no real, hey, this is what I need to do to try and become more, you know, listened to or whatever. I just really haven't done that. You know, I don't make disco music. You know, there was times in the 70s when rock bands started making disco because that's what was popular. Yep. And I'm like, you know, I really haven't done too much of that stuff. So,
well, they can always tell. People can always tell when you're faking it. It becomes so laborsome, and you know they can see through it.